Hello, everyone. If you are in the East Coast, it is good afternoon, but I know we have folks joining us from all over the country and the world. My name is Jen Johnson. I'm the Director of Orientation, Transition, and Retention, and I'm so glad that you're here today for our session. Quick programming note, in the chat box in GoToWebinar, you'll see a link that's been posted that has the closed captionings for this session that you can get in real time. We also are recording this session, and we'll be posting it on our YouTube channel in about 24 to 48 hours. And that will also have closed captioning that we'll be transcribing as well. So all that information will certainly be there for you. The question box is available for you as well to talk with us during this session. So without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to my colleagues to talk about disability support and the Academic Support Access Center at AU.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Lindsay Northup-Moore, and I'm the Director for Disability Support here at AU. You can see my little picture down there on the left. And I'm also joined today by my colleague, Nicole Nowinski, who's our Associate Director for Disability Support. And you can see her picture on the right. We're going to do this presentation. We're going to go through some slides, and then we'll come on our webcams at the end to answer questions for everyone. So Nicole and I are going to speak to you for about 15 to 20 minutes, and then we'll leave plenty of time for you to ask questions. We've also received some questions ahead of time that we've either incorporated into our slides or we'll be starting with answering at the end of the webinar. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, great, thank you. Here is our agenda for the webinar today. First, we'll take you through what our disability support team does here at AU. And then we'll talk about how you can request accommodations. I know that's what everyone is here to learn. And then we will give you some important dates. These are going to be some priority deadlines for accommodations. And then we'll give you a few transition tips for you students in the audience there. We're really excited to have you, and we want to give you some information on how you can make your transition to AU smooth. And then for the parents and families out there, we're going to also give you some information on how you can support your student with their transition. And then finally, we'll end with some supports that are available to all students at AU that we know also really help a lot of our students with disabilities. And now I am going to turn over the mic to my colleague, Nicole, to take you through some more specifics about accommodations.
Hello, everyone. This is Nicole. So I'm going to go over for you now what role our team, the disability team, plays for you here at American University. So the first thing is that we determine reasonable accommodations by working through our three-step registration process for accommodations with students, and that often involves consulting with other relevant faculty and staff. I will go through the three-step process on our next slide, so just hold for a second on that. The next area that we work on is facilitating student access to those approved accommodations by students registering with us. And then this often involves meeting and communicating with students with disabilities, often beginning over the summer now, prior to your first semester at AU, and then often on an as-needed basis as you may work through your years here at AU around things that might arise or just kind of ongoing accommodations use. Our office, we also, like our team, excuse me, our disability team, we serve as a referral point as well to other university resources. So that might be academic support. We're going to go over a bunch of that later on. Other medical and mental health resources around campus, and just other things that kind of play out in the student experience. We are a connection point for students to access those. All right, our next slide. Thank you. So how do students request accommodations at American University? We've kind of narrowed it down to the three-step process, and I'll start with step one. The first thing that you would need to do is complete our online student accommodations questionnaire, as we call it our SAQ. This can be found on our website, and it's an online form that it's about maybe 9 or 10 questions where you, the student, have the opportunity to give us a self-report around your experience of accommodations use, maybe your history with accommodations, what you are looking to request while here at AU, just a way that you can write information out and give that to us. And this would be in addition to meeting with our staff later on. The second step is to submit clinical documentation that supports the accommodations that you're requesting. And we are specifically looking for information that shows a clear nexus between the student's diagnosis and their functional limitations and the accommodations that they are requesting. On our website, we have a bunch of different documentation guidelines that are broken out by category type. So we do encourage you to take a look at those guidelines to see what we might be looking for based on why you're registering with our office so that you can gather that information. Your documentation can be submitted to us in 2 different ways. So the first way is actually through the questionnaire, the student accommodations questionnaire. It can be uploaded right to that form. The other way that it can be submitted to our office is either by emailing it to our staff managed email account or faxing it to our office. We, in the times that we're in right now, we're not currently on campus as staff, so we would probably discourage you to send documentation by snail mail to our office. We're just not actively getting that information all the time. So to prevent delays, we would encourage you to submit your documentation electronically. Once we received both steps 1 and 2, our office staff on the disability team, we review all of the information that we've received. And we make a determination if we have enough information to move forward with inviting the student to schedule an intake appointment with us. If we do not have enough information, so say for instance, it's unclear what you as a student are requesting, or maybe your documentation is incomplete, our office will also reach out, the disability team will also reach out to you to let you know so that you can give us additional information. And typically that outreach will be within 1 to 2 weeks of receiving steps 1 and 2. But keep in mind that in higher volume times of our summer or semester, that review can take a little bit longer. And step 3 here is meeting for an intake appointment. And at that appointment, if accommodations are determined, we go over the process for receiving an accommodation letter from us, providing that to your faculty members for each of your courses, and a bunch of other things around using accommodations here at the university. We can jump to the next slide. So there's a number of categories of accommodations in addition to academic accommodations, which is often what students reach out to us about. We also navigate with our campus partners housing accommodations. So for instance, if a student maybe needs to request access to a single user restroom in the residence halls, that can be requested of us. We also navigate dining accommodations. So if you have severe food allergies, we would work with you and our partners in AU Dining for facilitating any necessary accommodations through that. We also navigate physical access around campus. So some of our campus buildings are less accessible than others. So we work with our partners to ensure that if there's an accessibility accommodation, that everything is in place for the student there. And this is not an exhaustive list of categories, but kind of just to give you a sense of the range of accommodation requests that we navigate. And all of these requests would go through our 3-step process that I just covered on the last slide. Next slide. So some important dates to remember. So this Friday, June 6th, is our priority deadline for housing accommodation requests. So if you think that you might need to request a housing accommodation, we definitely encourage you to begin that process soon. July 15th, 2020, that is our priority deadline for all other accommodation requests, so academic, dining, physical access, anything else that you might need. And this really ensures that we will be able to engage with you and navigate your requests prior to the start of the semester. There is no deadline to request any accommodation with our office. However, you know, if there is a busy time in our semester where you are making a request, the timing may take a little bit longer to process those. So an example, if you would like to request extended time for your final exams and it's a week and a half before finals begin, we may not have enough time to facilitate that request prior to the start of final exam. So we certainly encourage you, if you think that you might need to request accommodations, to do so as soon as possible with our office. And the web link is there if you want more information about the request process in general. We can jump to the next slide. Okay, so transition tips for students with disabilities. So as I've said, we encourage you to register with the ASAC over the summer. Priority deadline is July 15th. We want you to consider, you know, that you will now be, if you are not already, you are going to be in the driver's seat for your accommodations here at the university. So we encourage you to be familiar with your disability, how it may or may not impact different parts of your life. And speak with your parents or family members or teachers about maybe how you've used supports through your education up to this point, what's worked for you, what may be different as you transition to college. We also encourage you to be familiar with your documentation and what it says or means. This will really serve you well as you begin to advocate with your disability access advisor here in our office around your accommodation needs. And we can actually better support you the more familiar you are with your documentation and everything that's in it. We also encourage you to think about how you will manage the perceived abundance of, quote, free time when you transition to college. So some of you may have experience with this already, you know, with the changes in your education the last few months from COVID-19. So if you've had more free time in your day, what's worked for you? What hasn't worked for you? And we would encourage you to think about how you could incorporate some strategies over the summer now prior to coming to university, where your time will be different than sitting in class every day from 8 to 2, for example. Next slide, please. Some additional transition tips for students. So really knowing your medical needs. So if you are coming to DC from somewhere else in the country, do you need to find any new doctors or therapists in the area that you would need to meet with on a semi-regular basis? Are you going to have to find a new pharmacy for your medication? Thinking about all of those things, what's around campus available to you. We also encourage you to think about how you're going to manage stressful times that we all know will happen at some point, and working with your support system for how you can manage those stressful times. And lastly, you know, the first semester of college is new for you in so many ways. If there are strategies or things that work for you now, we encourage you to consider continuing those. So for instance, if you get up every day and you go on a walk to start your morning, to set yourself up for the rest of your day, maybe we encourage you to think about doing that. If there's accommodations or medications that you use now that work for you, think about continuing those or requesting those through our office to kind of get you set up for a successful start to your first year at AU. Lindsay, do you have anything that you want to add to our tips for students before we move on to parents?
I think you covered it really well, Nicole. I do want to echo the newness factor. There is so many new things that are going to be going on for you that I really encourage you to stick with what you know works for you when it comes to accommodations, medications, and routines as much as you possibly can. You can absolutely alter them, you know, later on in your college career, but for the first semester, let's start with what you know works, and then go from there. Because you're already going to be doing so many amazing new transitions into new things and meeting new people and having new classes. So let's have a good baseline would be my encouragement to all of you. Okay, so I think next slide. How can parents and families help? I know we've got a lot of parents and families on this call. So glad that you're here. So I want to make sure that we are addressing how you can support your students, because we know that you've been supporting your students for many years throughout their time in K-12 and even before that, and that you'll continue doing so. So we're sure many of you are wondering what your role is now. We have a few tips on how you can continue to support your students as they make their transition to college during their time here. First, you, along with your student, can become knowledgeable about disability support at the post-secondary level, which is actually what you're doing now, which is fantastic. And as we've said, the landscape and also the laws change. So learning a bit more about that can be helpful. Not everything translates exactly from the K-12 to the higher ed systems. So secondly, supporting your student in assuming responsibility for managing their accommodation needs. Review their documentation with them, make sure they're comfortable talking about their disability and the needs that relate to it. It's so helpful when students come to our office and are already familiar with the documentation that they have. We can really get going right away then with the students. And this is such a student-driven process, so it's really helpful when you can help them learn that before we're even making the fall transition. And then finally, emphasize the importance of self-disclosure and self-advocacy and provide opportunities for practicing these skills. These are things our office will also work on with students, but it's wonderful when students come at the start and have a good sense of how their disability impacts them, how to communicate that, and with and have the ability to ask for what they need. And then finally, AU has many supports open to all students that may have been a part of IEPs or 504 plans, and we can talk about those in the next slide. So we have these academic supports that are available to all students, including tutoring, supplemental instruction, writing support, academic coaching. A lot of these things I think are resources that students have used already in their elementary, middle school, high school experiences, and we can continue those at AU for all students. We have one-to-one peer tutoring for many, many subjects, and especially math stats. We have an entire math stats lab just for students to use, and it's drop-in tutoring. We have supplemental instruction, which is group learning and challenging courses that's done by students who have done well in the course previously, and they're continuing to take the course along with the students, even though for a second time, and providing extra instruction. And then we have writing support. We have an amazing writing center that students can sign up for one-to-one peer writing support. It's very heavily used, as is all of these supports actually, and students really enjoy them and find a lot of use out of them. And then we have academic coaching, and these coaching sessions can work with students on time management, reading and note-taking strategies, test prep. This is also some things that we do in our office with our students, but it's available to all AU students as well. Okay, and so I think we have come to the end of our presentation. I know a few people have asked some questions in the chat box, so we're going to get to those. And we also have questions that people have already asked. But before I do that, Nicole, is there anything else that you think we should add?
Not at this point. I think we can address a number of the questions. Why don't we start with a couple that came in prior to our presentation. So the first one that was asked of us.
Webcam here. There we go. Hi, everybody. I wish I could see all of you, but now you can see me.
And I am here too. So the first question that was asked of us prior to the start of our webinar, do students need to re-register every semester with our office?
Great question.
Lindsay, you want to take this one?
Sure. This is a great question. And it somewhat depends. If we're talking about academic accommodations, typically those will run the entire time a student is here at AU. As long as the documentation is up to date and all of that. So typically those will run all 4, 5, 6, however many years, 1 year you're with us, you can use that. Housing accommodations, students do need to re-register, re-request every year. And that's because our housing changes for students every year. So we have to make sure that we know what you need and where we can place you for that. And also not all students choose to live on campus every year. So we do have students re-register in those ways.
And the other thing that does happen every year is that students who have accommodations from year to year in terms of academics, you will get an accommodation letter, as I said earlier in the webinar, that you will provide to your faculty members each semester. And typically that letter will be good for a full academic year. So fall 2020, spring 2021. And then typically every August, a student will be reissued an accommodation letter for that specific academic year.
And I
So
actually want to play off that real quick. I know there was a question about, do I need to speak with my professors about accommodations at the start of each class? And the answer is yes, you do. Once you receive that academic accommodation memo from our office, it is then the student's responsibility, it's your responsibility to provide that to your faculty member at the beginning of each class or whenever you first receive the memo. And that is your way of notifying the student, the professor, that you need accommodations and that they will accommodate you.
Great. So our next question, do students with extended time on exams take exams at a testing center?
Great question. The answer is you can choose to take your accommodations in a testing center. We have one in our office in the ASAC, and you can absolutely schedule that. You can schedule it online. It's actually pretty easy, and we have a full-time testing coordinator that can help coordinate those exams and the proctoring. You can also speak with your professor about choosing to take it in class. That is absolutely up to you as well. I will say most students do take their exams with us in the ASAC, but you absolutely also can speak with your professor and have the option to take it with the general class.
Great. So another question that came on the chat box is, when you say register with the Academic Support and Access Center, do you mean complete steps 1 and 2? We actually refer to all 3 steps. So steps 1 and 2 are what the student needs to complete in terms of the questionnaire and submitting documentation to us. And then the 3rd step, once invited to schedule an intake appointment, the student must complete that in order to formalize any approved accommodations with our office. So registration does not mean just pushing the questionnaire to us and documentation. It's the actual completion of the intake process. Another question that we have is related to some of the tutoring and academic services. So is the tutoring included in tuition? Are peer tutors upperclassmen? And how does a student who doesn't have accommodations access the academic coaching?
Great questions. So typically the tutoring is included in the tuition. There are some courses, some special, if a student is looking for a tutor for some upper level specialized courses, there may be a fee involved, but we also the ASAC does help facilitate finding someone for that course. But generally for the lower level courses and the historically challenging courses, it is free to all students at AU. We also have the quantitative lab, which does math, stats, tutoring, and that is open to all students for drop-in, and they can use that support at any time in their career at AU, and same with all of these other ones. And then for the academic coaching, as if a student wants coaching, they can sign up through the ASAC website, which is at the bottom of our PowerPoint there under the academic support and academic coaching. I do want to just let everyone know here that all of the supports that we offer in the ASAC, disability support and academic support, transition to online during this time. So we have not had a break in any services. Everything is still offered, and it's just offered virtually, just like this webinar.
Right, and as a follow-up to that, There was also a question about the Writing Center. So all of the Writing Center appointments are free of charge. There's a lot of information on our website around the Writing Center. A really great question. All of these have been great questions, but one we received was, my son has been contacted by his first year advisor. Should he wait for accommodations before registering for classes? Absolutely not. You should move forward with registering for classes whenever you are told to do so by your first year advisor. Accommodations decisions, we're managing all of the requests and steps 1 and 2 and on a rolling basis currently. So your accommodations request should not hold up registering for classes.
I know there have been some questions about timing and hearing from individuals in our office, and I want you guys all to know that we have been reviewing accommodation requests. We are hoping to hear, when we do hear from the university on what our fall is going to look like, that's when we're going to start taking the major action on engaging with our students and figuring out our accommodations, because depending on the landscape, some things can change. So we want to make sure that we're getting it right from the beginning. And that has to do with housing and academic. But if you have specific questions, you're also always welcome to email us at asac@american.edu. You can call us. You can always have a phone consult with someone, or a Zoom consult with somebody in our office.
Yes, and that email address, ASAC, our acronym, at american.edu, that is where documentation can be emailed, and it will be uploaded to your student's electronic file with our office once we receive it. I think we don't have time to answer all of the questions. We have time for probably 1 or 2 more. So one question we have here, is there counseling available on campus for students with anxiety? Yes, the counseling center is available to students, and there are a certain number of free sessions that each student has for the year. There's a lot more information about the counseling center on their website, and I believe will be covered in other presentations as well, for you to kind of to understand about that.
Just speaking quickly about that, because we know a lot of students who work with our office do use counseling services. If you typically have a regular therapist that you meet with, our counseling center is good for short-term use, but it's not for long-term. So you're going to want to find someone in the area that can do long-term, and now is a great time to start that. And if you want help with that, you can contact the counseling center. They absolutely help match students up with people in the DC area to work with.
Great. So maybe one last question. So this last one, Lindsay, can you supplement your disability request after the plan for the fall has been released? So if accommodations have been determined, can you modify that in the future?
Absolutely. You know, our first meeting with you is just the beginning. We work with our students for the entire time that they're here at AU. Things change, conditions change, classes change, environments change. We know that with our students, and we are always here for you. Once you register with our office, you're assigned that disability access advisor, and that's going to be your person to work with. And you can meet with them on a semi-regular basis. You can be in communication with them as much as you like. And if you have questions or new needs, all you have to do is bring them to our attention and we can work with you.
Great. So we know there were other questions, and we will do our best to respond to you after this is completed. But as Lindsay said before, if you have any outstanding questions or more personal questions, please reach out to us either by email or by phone, and we will get in touch with you and help get you the answers that you need. And we really appreciate you taking the time to be on our webinar. Lindsay, do you want to say anything else?
No, I mean, thanks so much for being here. We're really excited to have you, and I can't wait to meet all of you. Thank you.